Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through stacks of sources, articles, research, our own notes to bring you the core insights, the really important stuff.
That's the idea.
And today we're diving into a story that, honestly, it almost seems unbelievable in the tech world.
Right.
Think about this. A company, once a dominant force, but by 2014, it's kind of fading, valued around $300 billion.
Which is still huge, but yeah, fading.
Exactly. But then, just over 10 years later, it's not just back, it's soared to a staggering $3.5 trillion.
It's incredible, over 10 times the value.
So the big question for us today is, how? How does one CEO pull off that kind of growth?
Yeah?
And maybe the really wild part is, what if the answer isn't about building more, but about, well, tearing down almost everything the company used to stand for?
That's a fantastic framing. And the answer, as our sources really lay out, points squarely at Satya Nadella. He became Microsoft's CEO back in February 2014, and he wasn't your typical flashy tech leader. No big pronouncements, not a lot of noise.
Quietly relentless, though.
Absolutely relentless. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So before we get into what he changed, can you really set the scene? Just how shaky was Microsoft's position when he came in? What were they really up against?
It was precarious. Think of Microsoft in 2014. Huge, yes, but kind of burdened by its past success.
Okay.
Externally, the mobile war, they'd lost completely.
Correct. iPhone, Android,
Yeah.
game over for Windows Phone.
Pretty much. And cloud, their big hope, Azure.
Hmm.
It was years behind Amazon Web Services. AWS was already dominating.
Too late to the game there, too.
Very late. And then internally, oh boy, the culture.
Not good.
Sources paint a picture of, well, toxic, lots of intense internal competition, silos everywhere. Teams just wouldn't talk to each other.
Really? That bad?
Yeah. And this pervasive fear of failure. Nobody wanted to stick their neck out, so real innovation just wasn't happening. It felt like a company haunted by its past, struggling to navigate a world that had already changed.
Wow. Okay, so that's a tough hand to be dealt. And Nadella, he didn't come in saying, let's just preserve the legacy, right?
Not at all. That's what's so fascinating. He didn't follow the usual CEO playbook.
Which is often about shoring things up, yeah.
Exactly. Instead, he basically said, we need to rewrite this whole thing. He started questioning everything.
Like what?
I mean, the mission statement itself, how
Yeah.
people got promoted, how products were even developed, and crucially, who Microsoft partnered with.
Even rivals. Because that wasn't the old Microsoft way.
Absolutely not. Partnering with rivals, that was almost unthinkable before Nadella. He questioned every single sacred cow.
That sounds incredibly disruptive. Was there pushback? How do you get an organization that big to even consider questioning its foundations?
Well, that's the genius of his approach, perhaps.
Yeah.
He didn't frame it as just change for change's sake. He framed it as survival, as the only path back to relevance.
Okay, I see.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive today. We're going to break down the 5 biggest, most fundamental rules that Satya Nadella shattered.
And how breaking each rule wasn't just symbolic, but actually propelled Microsoft forward.
Exactly. How it took them from that, $300 billion fading giant to the $3.5 trillion powerhouse we see today. Right at the center of AI, cloud, the future of work.
So if you're out there listening, maybe you're a founder, a leader, or just curious about how massive transformations happen, this is definitely for you.
Absolutely. Let's unpack it. Okay, let's start with maybe the biggest, most foundational rule he broke first.
Which was?
Microsoft's absolute fixation on the PC for, 30 years? More?
Yeah, it was everything.
Their entire identity was anchored to this one vision, this mantra, a PC on every desk and in every home.
That came straight from Bill Gates, didn't it? Back in the 80s.
It did. And it wasn't just a slogan on a poster. It was the North Star, the most sacred rule. Every product, every strategy, it all revolved around the PC.
And you have to give them credit. For a long, long time, that rule worked incredibly well.
Oh, absolutely. It fueled their dominance in the desktop era. Windows became, Windows, the global standard.
And Office, too. Every office, every school, practically.
Exactly. By the early 2000s, they were the kings of the desktop. Undisputed.
But the world didn't stand still. So why did Microsoft find it so hard to adapt? What kept them tethered to that PC vision when things were clearly changing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or, trillion-dollar now.
Uh-huh.
While they were busy perfecting their PC empire, the ground shifted dramatically.
Mobile.
Well, ball exploded. Smartphones, tablets, they were everywhere by 2014. And the cloud.
Becoming the essential infrastructure.
The absolute backbone. letting companies scale, innovate like never before. You had competitors, Google, Amazon, moving so much faster, leaner,
And Microsoft.
still acting like the desktop PC was the center of the universe. Their identity was so wrapped up in it, they were almost blind to these massive shifts. Stuck.
And this is where Nadella comes in and does something, well, unthinkable at the time, just weeks into the job.
Yeah. He didn't just tweak the mission statement. He threw it out and started over.
What was the new one?
To empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more.
Notice what's missing.
Exactly. No PC, no desk, no hardware focus at all.
It wasn't just a rebrand then.
Not even close.
No.
It was a fundamental philosophical reset. A whole new reason for Microsoft to exist.
Yeah.
And those 14 words, you can't overstate their significance.
How so?
By taking the PC out of the core mission, Nadella untethered Microsoft from its past. It was like this quiet revolution, but it completely changed the direction for 130,000 employees.
Suddenly the blinders were off.
Yeah. They could think beyond Windows, beyond Office, even beyond Microsoft's own walls. It fostered this new outward look, focusing on the user, not the device.
So this new mission, this broader philosophy, it opened up completely new avenues, right?
Yeah.
Give us some examples. What could they do now that was maybe off limits before?
Okay, think about this. Suddenly it made sense to build really good products for iPhones.
For Apple devices, yeah, that was huge.
They're partnering with Linux. Remember how the previous CEO called it a cancer?
I do. That was unthinkable.
Now, they could embrace it. They could invest massively in Azure, the cloud platform they were repined on, because it empowered organizations.
Right. It fit the new mission.
It fit perfectly.
Yeah.
They could rethink their business model, moving from selling software in a box to subscriptions to services, and they could chase entirely new markets because their value wasn't tied to a specific device anymore. It was about enabling achievement.
That's a really key shift, focusing on people achieving more, not just on the technology itself. How did that change the questions teams were asking internally?
It changed everything. The conversation shifted. Instead of, how do we sell more Windows licenses?
Which was the old way.
Totally.
Yeah.
Now it became, how can we help, say, a small business in Nairobi grow faster, whatever tech they're using?
That's a different mindset.
Completely. Or instead of, how do we beat Apple, which was the old competitive focus,
Right.
it became, how do we make our tools useful and accessible to everyone, no matter what device they prefer? It forced this human-centric approach, looking outward at user needs.
And internally, this gave Nadella a really powerful narrative, didn't it? He wasn't just shuffling deck chairs.
No, he was inviting the whole company onto a new ship. To think bigger, work differently, and, maybe the hardest part, to let go of what used to work, but was now holding them back.
He had a quote about that, didn't he? About tradition.
He did, and it was brilliant. He didn't bash the past, he actually honored the legacy. But then in an early speech, he dropped this line: "Our industry does not respect tradition, it only respects innovation."
Oof. That must have landed heavily in a place like Microsoft.
You bet it did. A company built on tradition, it was a direct warning, especially to leaders. Adapt, innovate, or you'll become irrelevant. Step aside.
And that really started to shift the culture, slowly at first, I imagine.
All big cultural shifts are slow at first, yeah. But then it gained momentum. You started seeing real changes in how people worked day to day.
Like how?
Engineers, who used to live in fear of making a mistake because of things like stack ranking.
We'll get to that.
Right. They were suddenly encouraged to take risks. Failure wasn't career-ending anymore, as long as you learn from it. That's huge.
Massive change.
Managers were pushed to be coaches, not just controllers, to build psychological safety. And product teams, they started genuinely focusing on solving real user problems, not just ticking feature boxes or trying to lock people into the Microsoft ecosystem.
It sounds like a shift from inward-looking competition to outward-looking customer focus.
That's exactly it.
So looking back, breaking this first rule, the PC-centric mindset was maybe the most critical step. Why was redefining what Microsoft stood for so fundamental?
Because everything else flowed from it. Without that philosophical reset, none of the other big moves would have been possible. The cloud bet, the AI push, the crazy partnerships, none of it works if you're still fundamentally a Windows company.
Set the stage.
Completely. Nadella understood that the business wasn't just about what Microsoft sold, but who it served. That became the new North Star. It was a great line in one of our sources. You can't build a $3.5 trillion company on a $300 billion mindset.
That sums it up perfectly.
He knew he had to break the old foundation to build something much, much bigger.
That's a perfect transition to the second rule Nadella shattered.
Yeah.
He stopped defending the comfort zone, that massive cash cow of Windows and Office.
Right. The core business.
In 2014, that was still, what, 70% of Microsoft's revenue?
Yeah.
Windows, Office, the traditional software licenses.
Yep. The on-premise stuff, that was the engine printing money, the absolute comfort zone.
So how do you convince a company that reliant on something to look beyond it, to bet big on something?
Oh, yeah.
Unproven.
This is where Nadella's vision really showed its strength. He just saw the future differently, and that future wasn't on a hard drive.
He was in the cloud.
Absolutely. But remember the context? AWS, Amazon's cloud.
Already way ahead, dominant.
Miles ahead. And Microsoft's own Azure. Honestly, sources say it was clunky, late, not even profitable.
And internally, people were probably saying, why are we doing this?
Exactly. We're a software company. Why are we chasing infrastructure? That's not us. That was the internal resistance. But Nadella saw that infrastructure was becoming the new software platform.
So he didn't just dip a toe in, he went all in. Can you describe the scale of that bet? How did he sell this massive pivot internally?
Oh, it wasn't just doubling down. He tripled down. He basically bet the company on cloud.
Seriously?
Yeah. Very early on, he declared Microsoft would be cloud first, mobile first. And this is before the market, or even many inside Microsoft really believed it.
Gutsy.
Totally. And he had this guiding principle he kept repeating. We must fall in love with the problem, not the product.
Okay, what was the problem he saw?
The problem was businesses needing to move faster, data needing to be smarter, software needing to evolve constantly at massive scale. And the only way to solve that problem, he argued, was the cloud. He kept hammering the why, focusing on empowering customers in new ways.
And now, fast forward, how did that massive bet pay off?
Oh, it's been utterly transformative. I mean, look at the numbers now, Q2 2025. Azure alone drives over 40% of Microsoft's total revenue.
40%, from being way behind.
Exactly. Their cloud services pulled in, what, $64.7 billion in quarterly revenue?
Yep.
Up 29% year over year. They're going head-to-head with AWS now, often winning, especially in enterprise AI and hybrid setups. It's an unbelievable turnaround.
But he didn't stop there. He saw the next big wave coming too, right? Artificial intelligence?
Yes. And he was determined not to miss this one, especially after the whole mobile phone fiasco.
So how did he approach AI? What was the rule-breaking part of that bet?
This is where it gets really interesting and maybe counterintuitive. He broke another rule. Instead of just relying on Microsoft's own internal R&D, initially at least,
He looked outside.
he bet on someone else's technology. A quiet but totally radical decision back in 2019.
OpenAI.
OpenAI, which was, a relatively small startup back then.
Right, not the household name it is now.
Yeah, not at all. Microsoft poured over $13 billion into OpenAI over the next few years, securing exclusive rights to weave their models into Azure and, significantly, into Bing.
That Bing integration was huge.
But the OpenAI bet was kind of quiet for a few years, and then, boom.
ChatGPT happened.
ChatGPT explodes onto the scene.
Yeah.
Suddenly, generative AI is all anyone can talk about. And Microsoft is right there.
Perfectly positioned.
Bing gets its AI makeover, directly challenging Google. And maybe more impactful for most people, Microsoft's Office transforms into Microsoft Copilot.
AI embedded right into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Teams.
Exactly. Suddenly, AI wasn't some abstract thing. It was helping you write emails, analyze spreadsheets, create presentations. And look at GitHub Copilot for developers. By mid-2025, it was writing like 30% of their code suggestions. That's a fundamental change in how work gets done.
And Microsoft isn't just relying on OpenAI anymore, are they? What's their broader AI strategy now?
No, they're building the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
At their Build conference in May 2025, they unveiled their own big model, MII1. But crucially, they also announced partnerships with other major AI players, xAI, Mistral, Anthropic, NVIDIA.
So playing the field a bit.
It's about being the platform. Nadella's message is clear. We are not just building software. We are building intelligence infrastructure for the world.
Wow, that's a big statement.
It's a huge shift from selling licenses to building the foundational layer for, well, everything. The future of work, creativity, science. They want to be the picks and shovels for the AI gold rush.
So this Microsoft is unrecognizable from the one clinging to Windows 10 years ago. They killed their own sacred cows. What's the tough lesson here for leaders listening?
The hard truth. You have to be willing to let go of what's comfortable, even if it's still working, even if it's making money now.
Disrupt yourself before someone else does.
Exactly. Nadella disrupted Microsoft from the inside out. He forced it to shed its old skin and embrace completely new ways of thinking. And that's why they didn't just survive. They transformed into this $3.5 trillion powerhouse leading the AI age. It took real foresight, real courage.
And that internal disruption went way beyond products and strategy. It went right into the culture, which brings us to rule number 3, dismantling that toxic management style and leading with empathy.
Yeah, if the tech was stuck in the past in 2014, the culture, arguably, it was even worse.
Can you describe it? What was so bad, especially that stack ranking system everyone talks about?
Oh, it was notorious. Brutal, really. Microsoft was known for intense internal politics, those rigid silos we mentioned.
Yeah, no collaboration.
And then stack ranking. Basically, every year, managers had to rank their employees on a forced curve. Top performers, average, and bottom.
Forced curve, meaning even on a great team, someone had to be ranked low.
Exactly. Even if your whole team was amazing, someone got labeled bottom performer. Bonuses, promotions, even keeping your job depended on where you landed.
That sounds incredibly stressful and counterproductive.
It destroyed trust, killed collaboration. Why help someone else when you're ranked against them? It rewarded playing politics and self-preservation, not innovation. Just a deeply flawed, fear-based system.
Nadella had lived through that himself, right? So he knew it had to go.
Absolutely. It was one of the very first things he did as CEO, dismantled it, gone.
But he didn't just stop there, did he? He replaced it with something totally different, a philosophy built around empathy. That seems unusual for a tech CEO.
Highly unusual. He announced early on, we are moving away from a culture of prove it all to a culture of learn it all. That itself was a huge signal.
Learn it all versus know it all.
Precisely. Valuing growth over just being right. But yeah, he went further. He put empathy right at the center of his leadership philosophy. And for him, it wasn't just a corporate buzzword. It was deeply personal.
Can you share that story? How did his personal life shape this focus on empathy?
His eldest son, Zane, who sadly passed away in 2022, was born with cerebral palsy and had significant disabilities. Nadella has spoken very openly about how that experience fundamentally changed him. He said he had to shift from asking, why did this happen to me, to asking, what can I learn from this to better support others? That mindset shift, he brought it directly into Microsoft.
Wow.
Suddenly, the conversation inside Microsoft changed. It wasn't just about product features. It became about accessibility, about designing for inclusion, for people with diverse needs. Think about things like the Xbox Adaptive Controller that came out of this empathic focus.
And internally, how did he replace stack ranking?
He brought in this new model, coach, care. Leaders were now evaluated on how well they helped their teams grow, how well they listened, if they created safe environments for risk-taking and learning. He also brought in Kathleen Hogan as Chief People Officer, who was instrumental in rebuilding HR around trust, not control.
So what were the results? Did this softer approach actually work in a high-pressure tech company?
The results were striking. Internal employee engagement score shot up over 25% between 2015 and 2025, according to LinkedIn data. That's massive.
Huge leap.
Turnover among top engineers dropped significantly. And critically, collaboration across teams, which was almost non-existent before, dramatically improved.
And that enabled new products.
Absolutely. Things like Copilot, Microsoft Loop, the AI integrated mesh platform, these all required intense cross-team collaboration that just wouldn't have happened under the old, siloed competitive culture. It proves psychological safety isn't just nice, it's essential for innovation.
It sounds like Nadella's goal wasn't just to make Microsoft a nicer place to work, though. It was deeper than that.
It was. He wanted it to be a place where people could genuinely grow, where they felt safe to try things, maybe fail, learn, and lead, where building together replaced fighting each other. He essentially traded fear for freedom.
And that unlocked something powerful.
It unlocked creativity, loyalty, and a willingness to go the extra mile that you just can't buy with bonuses. Breaking this rule, the rule of fear-based management, was maybe the most human change he made. And it showed that removing fear doesn't just lead to better products, it leads to better, more capable people.
That whole idea of collaboration, moving away from internal fighting, it extended externally too, didn't it? Which brings us to the fourth rule. Nadella shattered the idea that rivals are enemies. He started partnering with them.
Yeah, this was a huge shift from the old fortress Microsoft.
Describe that fortress mentality for us.
For decades, Microsoft acted like an empire under siege. They fought epic battles with Apple. Famously, Steve Ballmer called Linux a cancer, showing this deep hostility to open source.
Right. They controlled everything.
They controlled developers, locked them into proprietary platforms, fiercely guarded their turf, Competitors weren't just competitors, they were enemies. The mindset was purely winner takes all, often by shutting others out.
And Nadella just flipped that script entirely.
Completely. He broke that rule hard. Instead of threats, he saw opportunities in rivals. He adopted what he called an ecosystem mindset.
What was the core idea behind that?
It was beautifully simple, actually. His philosophy was, if it helps our users, then let's work with them, even if we used to fight them.
That's a 180-degree turn. What were some of the first signs of this, the early moves?
They started small, but symbolically huge. Opensourcing.net, a core Microsoft framework. That sent a massive signal to developers. That we're embracing open source now. Releasing Office for the iPad, putting Microsoft's crown jewels onto Apple's device. That was a shocker.
Definitely raised eyebrows.
And letting services like OneDrive and Teams run really well on Apple platforms, not just Windows. It showed they were serious about meeting users where they were, not forcing them onto Microsoft's turf. Ubiquity over exclusivity.
Then the acquisitions started. Big ones: LinkedIn, GitHub, Activision Blizzard. How were these different? How did they signal this new partnership approach?
These weren't just land grabs. There were signals of integration. LinkedIn, $26 billion in 2016, wasn't about owning a social network. It was about integrating professional identity into their tools.
Right.
GitHub, $7.5 billion in 2018, buying the absolute heartland of open source.
Yeah.
And crucially, promising not to mess with it. That was a massive trust-building move with the community they once alienated.
A huge reversal.
And Activision Blizzard, $68.7 billion, finally closing in 2023, wasn't just about games. It was about getting a big piece of the consumer content economy, again, integrating into a broader digital world. The strategy was connection, not conquest, becoming part of the ecosystem.
And the direct partnerships with traditional rivals. Give us some examples that would have been unthinkable before Nadella.
Oh, there are so many. Partnering deeply with Apple to get teams working seamlessly on iOS. Collaborating with Salesforce, a major competitor in the cloud CRM space.
Even though they compete directly.
Yeah, because it benefited joint customers. And maybe the most stunning, embracing Linux, not just tolerating it, but building the Windows subsystem for Linux, WSL, so developers could run Linux inside Windows.
From cancer to core feature.
Incredible, right? Total focus on interoperability over proprietary control.
And this continued even in the super competitive AI space. Despite the big OpenAI partnership, Microsoft is still working with others.
Absolutely. It shows how deeply ingrained this ecosystem thinking is now. Even with their huge OpenAI investment, they're actively partnering with Anthropic, Mistral, xAI, NVIDIA.
Why? Why not just push OpenAI?
Because they want Azure to be the platform for AI, regardless of which models you want to use. It's pragmatic, it recognizes the AI landscape is vast, and choice benefits users, which ultimately benefits their platform.
And we saw this at Build 2025 too, right? AI tools working across Google Docs, Notion, even Slack.
Yeah, that was mind-blowing. Microsoft AI helping you in Google Docs. 10 years ago, that would have been heresy.
So what's the underlying philosophy here? What did Nadella understand about power in the modern tech world?
He understood that modern power isn't about building walls. It's about being the central hub that everyone connects to.
The indispensable platform.
Exactly. The most powerful platforms pull others in, they don't lock them out. This shift from fortress to hub, from war to alliance, it was a totally new philosophy of influence. And ironically, by partnering with rivals, Nadella made Microsoft arguably the most powerful partner in tech. He shifted from winner takes all to win by helping others win.
That leads perfectly into the fifth rule Nadella redefined, the nature of leadership power itself, moving from command and control to listening.
Yes. It sounds simple, but it was radical. Most CEOs talk, they direct, they have the answers. Nadella listens. And it's not just a personality trait, it's a deliberate strategy.
How did he put that strategy into action?
Well, one of the first things he did, which seems almost quaint now but was revolutionary then, was embark on a listening tour.
What did that involve?
He didn't just meet with his direct reports, he met with everyone. Employees at all levels, engineers, marketers, interns, even former competitors. And he didn't lecture, he asked questions. Simple, powerful questions like, what's holding us back? What do you wish we could change?
For a top-down company like Microsoft historically was, that must have been a culture shock. Power there meant certainty, control, right?
Absolutely. Power meant knowing the answers and telling people what to do.
Yeah.
Nadella flipped that completely. He made humility a core leadership principle.
Humility in a CEO.
Yeah. He famously told his leadership team, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Wow.
And it wasn't fake humility. He understood a crucial truth. Trust isn't earned by always being right. It's earned by being open, by showing you value other perspectives. He built his influence step by step. Listen, learn, then act decisively based on that input. He modeled the behavior.
And this created that psychological safety you mentioned earlier. How did that become a competitive advantage? What changed on the ground?
It changed the speed and quality of innovation. Product teams could move faster because there were fewer layers of bureaucratic approval.
Less red tape.
Way less. Engineers felt empowered to experiment, knowing that failure wasn't fatal if they learned from it. Teams got the green light to build for non-Microsoft platforms, reinforcing that ecosystem mindset.
And the results?
More integrated products launched faster than ever before. Teams across different parts of the world started actually sharing code and insights, breaking down those old silos for real. Decision-making sped up, morale improved. You could feel the trust building.
And this soft power, this listening first approach, he used it externally too in big negotiations.
Definitely. Think about navigating the regulatory minefield for that massive Activision deal, or leading complex global talks about AI safety with governments.
His style's different.
Very different. Consistently calm, collaborative, centered. He wasn't trying to dominate the conversation or bully regulators. He built credibility by being, frankly, the adult in the room.
Which probably helped Microsoft navigate those tricky waters.
Immensely. It helped them close the Activision deal against significant opposition. It positioned Microsoft as a more trusted partner in those critical AI ethics discussions, not just another tech giant pushing its agenda.
So in an era where we see a lot of loud, perhaps egotistical tech leaders, Nadella's quiet, empathetic, listening-focused style really stands out.
It does. He showed that power doesn't have to mean domination, that sometimes the most influential thing a leader can do is listen. Choose humility over control. And that quiet intensity, that different way of leading, is arguably what made Microsoft truly matter again in a world that had grown skeptical of big tech.
Now, it wasn't all smooth sailing. No transformation story is. We have to talk about the failures, too, and how Nadella handled them. Specifically, the massive public failure of the Nokia acquisition.
Right. That's crucial. Because how leaders handle failure says a lot. Remember, Microsoft bought Nokia's phone business back in 2013 under Steve Ballmer.
The big bet to take on iPhone and Android.
Exactly. A $7.2 billion bet. But by the time Nadella took the CEO job in early 2014, the deal was done, but the dream was already dying.
It was clear pretty quickly it wasn't working, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. It was a disaster unfolding in public. Sales tanked. Developers abandoned the Windows Phone platform. Momentum completely stalled. It was a sinking ship.
And Nadella inherited this mess just months into his tenure. What did he do?
This is key. Many leaders might have tried to salvage it, pour good money after bad, try to save face. Nadella didn't.
He cut his losses.
He pulled the plug. Publicly. Clearly. Decisively. Microsoft ended up laying off over 18,000 people, mostly from Nokia, just a year later. It was painful. Really painful.
That must have been incredibly tough, especially so early on.
For sure. But in a memo in 2015, he wrote that famous line, "We will focus on where we can differentiate." The subtext was clear. Nokia isn't it. We're letting it go, even though it hurts, even though it's embarrassing. He chose to save Microsoft's focus rather than trying to save face on a losing bet.
And did he learn something fundamental from that failure? Did it shape their strategy going forward?
Absolutely. It led to a critical realization. The insight was, Microsoft can't just chase other companies' platforms, especially when they're already way behind, like in mobile. They missed that wave.
So what was the alternative?
They had to build the next platform. They had to anticipate the next big shifts and be there first, or at least be foundational to it.
And that realization, born from the ashes of the Nokia failure, became the catalyst for, well, their next massive pivot.
Exactly. It fueled one of the boldest pivots in tech history. They turned sharply away from mobile hardware, where they just failed so spectacularly.
Like ran straight towards
cloud and AI, all those resources, the money, the engineering talent that would have been wasted trying to salvage Nokia.
got redirected.
Aggressively redirected into Azure, into enterprise software, into AI research, and crucially, into that initially quiet bet on OpenAI. The Nokia failure, as painful as it was, directly enabled the cloud and AI success.
That's incredible. So fast forward again to 2025. What's the outcome of that pivot, that strategic redemption?
It's stunning. The company that utterly failed in mobile now powers something like 70% of enterprise AI workloads globally, through Azure, through OpenAI APIs, through GitHub Copilot.
So they didn't win the phone war.
No, but look at this irony. Apple still dominates mobile hardware, right? But Microsoft now provides a huge chunk of the infrastructure that powers Apple's own AI features.
Wow, that's not just recovery.
It's strategic redemption.
Mm.
Nadella understood you don't have to win every single battle. You just need to be indispensable to the future.
So the lesson isn't to avoid failure, it's how you respond to it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Nadella didn't deny the Nokia failure. He acknowledged it, learned from it, and used it as fuel to reimagine where Microsoft could actually win. That takes real courage. #TagHad outro.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. The story of Satya Nadella and Microsoft's transformation. It really is remarkable.
It truly is.
The leader who took this, somewhat stagnant, definitely siloed legacy giant.
A company many had written off.
Right. And in just over a decade, with no big ego trips, no major scandals, just quiet determination, turned it into a $3.5 trillion global force.
But as you said earlier, his real legacy isn't just what he built, it's what he was willing to break.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's recap what he dismantled.
Okay. He broke Microsoft's deep, almost compulsive addiction to Windows as its only identity.
He broke its obsession with control, both internally and externally.
He broke the rigid hierarchy, the toxic culture, that fear of failure that stifled everything.
He shattered that old belief that dominance only comes from locking out your competitors.
And maybe most profoundly, he broke the illusion that leadership has to look like traditional, top-down, command and control power.
So, distilling all of that, what are the core lessons, the takeaways for anyone listening? Let's hit those 5 points.
Okay, lesson 1. Break your own rules before the world breaks them for you. Nadella showed that true resilience comes from reinvention, not from clinging to the past. He moved before he was forced to.
Lesson 2. Bet on what's next, even when it's not obvious yet. Cloud, AI. He didn't wait for guarantees. He made bold bets on the future, and that's why Microsoft leads now. It takes foresight and calculated risk.
3. Culture is strategy. You just can't build cutting-edge innovation on an old, broken management foundation. Empathy, trust, psychological safety. Nadella proved these are essential, not optional.
4. Listening scales. Control doesn't. Choosing humility, genuinely listening. It unlocks influence and collaboration that top-down control never can. It empowers everyone.
And 5. Losing isn't failure unless you refuse to pivot. The Nokia disaster could have sunk them. Instead, Nadella used it as a catalyst, fueling the AI-first future. Failure is data if you use it right.
It really feels like Nadella didn't just lead a company, he redefined how companies should be led in this era.
Yeah, not with noise or fear, but with clarity, conviction, and that incredible courage to tear down what's no longer working. That feels like the kind of leadership we need more of.
So, you've heard this story. You see how this unbelievable transformation happened. It wasn't magic. It was leadership willing to question everything. Which brings us to the final thought, the question for you listening right now.
What rule are you still living by that no longer serves you?
Think about it, seriously. Is it in your career path? Something within your company, your team? Maybe it's just a personal belief, a mindset.
Could it be a definition of success that feels too small now? Or a system you're part of that runs on fear? Are you playing not to lose instead of really daring to lead?
Whatever that rule is for you, Nadella's journey is proof. Real transformation doesn't happen until you're brave enough to reinvent yourself, to break your own outdated rules.
So maybe take a breath, look at your own playbook, your own assumptions, and ask yourself that question.
What would I rebuild if I had the courage to break what's no longer true? If this deep dive resonated, if it challenged you or sparked something, share it, think about it. But most importantly, maybe act on it.
Because the next great transformation, it really might start with you.